Welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're working on a banana nut muffin recipe, and I'm modifying a Tyler Florence recipe from Food Network. So one of the quick modifications I'm going to make is using a dairy-free butter instead of regular butter, and the rest of the recipe is dairy-free and alpha-gal friendly. So let's get started. I've started by preheating the oven to 375 degrees. I've also mixed together all of our dry ingredients. This recipe calls for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, but I have some whole wheat flour left over from a previous recipe, so I'm going to use that today. It also calls for 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda. Now that I've mixed my dry ingredients together, I'm going to get started with my wet ingredients. This recipe calls for 4 overripe bananas. So I have 2 on the counter that are ready to use. I also have some frozen bananas that I've defrosted in the microwave. Anytime I have a banana that gets spots and is perfect for banana bread, I just throw it into a freezer bag in the freezer, peel it first, throw it into the freezer, and then I can pull it out and defrost it for this kind of recipe. So in the recipe, he splits apart the bananas. Half of them he gets really mixed in, and the other half he leaves a little bit chunky, but I don't go through that step. I just add all my bananas together. I don't mind that there's not chunks of bananas in my muffins. So I'll add my bananas to the bowl. Next, I'll add the brown sugar, and it takes 1 cup. And I'll get these good and mixed together. Now that the bananas and sugar are really mixed together, I'm going to add the melted butter. In this recipe, he says to melt the butter and let it cool. So I actually did that as my very first step, so it would be ready to add. And as a butter alternative, I'm using the Country Crock plant butter with olive oil. For me, this is a really good butter substitute. I find that it behaves the same way as regular butter, and the taste is really good. They also have one with avocado that I've used, and I like that one as well. So I'm mixing in the butter. Next, I'll add 2 eggs. I just washed these. These are eggs that our chickens gave us. I'll also add now a splash of vanilla. In the recipe, he says to use 1 teaspoon, but I like to add a little bit more for extra flavor. Another ingredient I like to add is cinnamon, so I'm adding about a tablespoon of cinnamon. My wet ingredients are all combined, so now it's time to add the dry ingredients. I want to be careful not to overmix, so I'll just mix until they're combined. I'll use a spatula to scrape down the sides, making sure everything gets evenly incorporated. And now for my favorite part, I'll be adding the pecans. The recipe calls for half a cup, but I usually do a whole cup because I love the flavor that they bring. I'm using roughly chopped pecans, and as I mix them, they'll break up into a little bit of smaller pieces. Okay, our batter is ready to be put into the muffin tin. The oven is preheated and these are ready to go in. So I'm going to lightly spray them with an olive oil spray so they don't stick. I'll start by filling each muffin with just 1/4 of a cup scoop, and I'll go back and add any as I need to make sure that they're all even. It's really important that you don't overfill your muffins because they will leak around the edges and it's really easy for that to burn in the oven. So they come out a lot cleaner. They're easy to get out of the pan if you leave a little bit of space at the top. And that looks pretty good. So before I put them in, I'll clean up any mess around the edges so it doesn't burn. And I'll put these muffins in for about 20 minutes at 375 degrees. The first batch of muffins just came out of the oven. 20 minutes was a perfect amount of time for them to be finished. This recipe makes 18 muffins, so I'll make 6 more with the rest of the batter, and I can't wait to try them.